Today we are going to tear down a bad late model Toyota engine. Boy, that sure sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? But of course, all of our minds go straight to the twin turbo 3.5 liter Tundra and Sequoia engine that everyone seems to want me to tear down on this channel, but nobody has. I cannot find one anywhere. No, we're talking about a regular 2.5 liter Camry engine that the clickbait champion himself, who dies 14 times a year, would even say would never end up on this stand on this channel, but here we are. This is the 2.5 liter A25A-FKS out of a 2018 Toyota Camry with 116,000 miles on it, and it's bad. And today we're going to tear this whole thing all the way down to find out why they replaced it. Is it really that bad? It's probably bad. Toyota's Dynamic Force A25A-FKS came out for the 2018 Toyota Camry. Now, these engines are offered in several different Toyotas in all parts of the globe, but this one I think is 18 through 22 Toyota Camry. This makes 203 horsepower and I believe 184 foot-pounds of torque. And by all accounts, at least at this point, they seem to be pretty good because this is the very first bad one I've seen. And of course, I had to buy it when I found it. Now, I have no idea about the value of any of the parts on this engine. I don't know their common problems. I did a bit of reading, and it seems to be most of the problems circulate around the fuel system and the EGR system. So I'll be curious to see if that's what condemned this engine or if it was some other type of failure. The very first thing I'd like to do, see if this engine turns over. I have no idea the condition of this engine. I don't have a story with it, just miles. So it seems to turn over just fine, which is good because that means it'll come apart all right. I don't hear anything too loose in there. Hear a little bit of a rattle, but I don't think that's Uncle Rodney. Might be one of his kids. The next thing we're going to do is pull the spark plugs and see what they look like. Well, these Denso iridiums don't look too terrible, but this one out of cylinder 2 is a little darker than the rest. Nothing's been regapped by a piston. I don't see any signs of malice in the combustion palace. These look pretty decent. Now, of course, now that the plugs are out of it, let's see how it feels with no resistance. Seems to move pretty smooth.
That didn't feel good?
Yeah, don't see any issues yet. Now we're going to start working on the intake manifold, and we'll remove this EGR plastic pipe. Some more things to remove. Before we get to the intake, we've got some more stuff to remove. This is the EGR cooler. Well, that's probably not a good sign. All that corrosion, that could be dried crusties from coolant, which could indicate a potential leaking EGR cooler. Now we can start to unbolt the intake manifold. I'm sure there's some down here. There's a support bracket. Wow, that was very simple. Let's take a look at these intake ports. There is some buildup, but it's not bad. I don't see any debris. I don't see signs of water. It's a really good sign. And one thing I do like about these engines, and a lot of Toyota engines, is they are both port and direct injected. So here's your direct injectors on the bottom, and here are your port injectors on the top. That way you get the benefit of having an injector in the combustion chamber, higher compression, and you also get the benefit of having port injection, keeping the valves and intake ports clean. Next, we'll remove the fuel feed line from the pump to the direct injection rail. Oh, that's tight. Oh, we're leaking fuel. Next, we will remove the high pressure fuel pump. we can get the roller out. Roller looks good. Feels good. That all looks okay. Next, we can get the valve cover off. I'm not sure why they went with smaller bolts in the center, but they did. Come here, Blue. Huh. That all looks pretty clean in there. Uh-oh. I don't see anything else terrible. Valve train looks to be in place. A little bit of sludge, but nothing horrendous. So there is a little bit of varnish in the back, but it's not terrible. The rest of this looks pretty decent. The only thing that I see that's kind of troublesome is the amount of play in the chain. Now, I will say that this probably has an oil pressure fed chain tensioner, and since it's obviously not running, there's probably no tension on that, but that still seems like a lot. Also, that chain is probably right off of my bicycle. Now we've got a couple brackets to take off so we can start on the timing cover. Those are excellent bolts for my engine stand. Now the belt tensioner. A little more housekeeping on the timing cover. I don't know if that helped me. Now the crank bolt. Now a little bit of oil leakage. The next thing we're going to remove is this, which is the variable valve timing cam motor. It's an electronic motor, and that's how it controls the valve timing. So we can just remove this. It's actually kind of an expensive piece. That's all there is to it. Next, we're going to unbolt the outer timing cover. Yes, it has an inner and an outer. I think I got them all. I'm pretty sure. Let's find out. There is a dowel right here. Oh, no, it's right there. It's right by where you have a place to pry. Ooh, it's making popping noises. I do like how many places there are to pry on this. Let's go to the other side. Oh, we're leaking. I better get the pan. That was one way to do it. I'm glad I had my hand on it. Let's see. There's the outer timing cover. You see no damage whatsoever. So looking at the timing system, you can definitely see the droop in the chain. All of the rails look like they're in pretty good shape, but you can definitely tell that the chain tensioner is fully depressed, which is why there's slack in the chain. So that's not super concerning because we don't know what it looked like when it was running. Here's your oil pump down here. It's all pretty simple. Now we're going to rotate this over and see what it looks like, see what the timing system does. And see, it takes the slack out right here. I don't see any issues. Now let's peel it apart. We're going to start with the tensioner. Should I be worried? Two different bolt sizes. Oh, it's on a stud. That's awesome. Oh, looks like we're going to have to pull this rail out first. Looks pretty good. Perfect. So we don't do this out of time. We're going to take this chain off using this method. Oh no! All right, now we can unbolt the other rail. That came right out. Now let's see if we can get this chain off. It's under quite a bit of tension, so this is dangerous. It's fine. Oh, it's fine. Oh, I see. The chain doesn't come out unless that bolt is off. Let me slide that off. What? Well, I don't want to use blue here, but I don't know what else to do. That comes off. I know it does. There we go. I just needed a little convincing persuasion. Look at that chain. Not really any noticeable play in the links. Let's take a look at these timing guides here. There's not a ton of wear. There's a little groove where the chain rode, but they aren't super brittle. I would imagine they don't look orange when they're new. Probably more of a white phenolic look. These look to be in excellent condition.
Not today.
Next, it's time to unbolt the inner timing cover. Did I miss any? I feel like I missed some, but I don't see any. Just to start prying on it and see what happens. I'm getting there. Oh, that was a good sound. We're off. Now we're going to take a minute and do some housekeeping, get the vacuum pump and some brackets off. That it? I think that's it. There's that vacuum pump. Got this water manifold. And while we're here, the dipstick tube, which is just a little guy. Just how bad could that be? Don't answer that. All ready? There we are. Not too bad. I think I'm actually going to pull the port injectors. They should be pretty easy. Oh yeah, that was very simple. But wait, there's more stuff to remove. I think we're going to remove this, this is actually the electronic water pump. It's electric.
Boogie woogie.
This just unbolts pretty simply. I could take this off the housing, but I'm going to remove it in one piece. Now it's hard to tell whether this is good or not. It looks like it's okay, but it is a used water pump, and they sell for an average of 80 bucks. I'm conflicted. Now we've got some stuff to unplug with some connectors that I don't quite understand. How do these injector connectors work? Oh, you just, like a normal one. All right, we just have this connector here. And now we're ready to start taking the cylinder head apart. Now this engine, much like its predecessor, uses a cam tower or cam plate. So I can remove the cam caps separate from the cam carrier, which is separate from the head. And normally you can pull it all as a unit, but we take things apart on this channel, don't keep them together. And I'd like to inspect the condition of the journals because we still don't know what's wrong with this engine. There's still no overwhelming clues, a little bit of coolant signs on the EGR cooler, but that's about it. So let's crack these cam caps loose and start taking this apart. Oh, that's tight. Well, the cam tower itself looks pretty good. All of the rollers feel good, and the cam followers, I don't really see anything too alarming. This all looks pretty clean. The oil in here looks pretty clean. Camshaft looks pretty good as well. I don't really see any notable wear. Maybe a little bit there. Still looks pretty good. The exhaust cam, a little bit of wear. It's really not bad. I would definitely reuse these. And as you'd expect, the caps are actually in pretty good shape too. Usually these are the first to show wear because of spring tension, but I don't see any real damage. Now it's time to remove the lower part of the cam tower so that we can have access to the head bolts. Blue. So they give you a place to pry, I wonder. A little bit. Now it's time to crack the head bolts loose. These are 12.12 millimeter. That sounds not like what I mean. Uh-oh. That felt like it was going to break. Come back here. That was unexpected. These are really tight for a Camry engine. That was a workout. All right, now this head should just lift off. But it isn't. Did I miss something? You guys see some issues here? You see the difference between that and that? That is a problem. I'm looking at the head gasket and I don't see a definite breach here. It doesn't look terrible. But that piston is clean and it's not supposed to be. Well, let's take a look at these bores. I think this thing's been sitting with some fluid in it. And I said fluid, is I'm not convinced it's water. And there's some vertical wear right there. As you can see how clean that piston is, and that only happens from water or coolant or fuel. That's pretty much it. Anything that can clean the piston, steam clean it, is either steam or solvent. And there's some wear to the bore. The bores just don't look that great in this engine. Not really used to seeing that in one of these engines. And then I'll look at the cylinder head. I looked it over pretty well. I don't see any cracks in the head, but you can see that this combustion chamber right here, that was the one with the clean piston. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. And it does look like there might be some breaches going on right here and here. Perhaps this engine was overheated. I don't see any like smoking gun type failures. No giant holes or burned or melted sections yet that I can see from this vantage point, but something clearly cleaned that combustion chamber. And this area is kind of suspicious, but why does that look that way? And it, whoa there, whoa there, whoa there. Why does that look that way? And only one of these has been cleaned. Now it's time for some science. Well, I think everything goes to the top of the bore, but now that that's all the way down, does that look any different? No, not really. Now we're going to rotate this thing over, see what kind of juice flows out of it, so we can pull the bottom end apart. I hope it's drained. Oh, there's a bunch of oil. That's not the color of oil. We didn't need that. Is there another one? Nope. Did somebody put caramel sauce in this thing? Now we'll get the oil filter off. Wait a minute. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? See, you guys always say I don't know what I'm doing. I was born at night a few nights ago. Now it's time to pull the lower oil pan. Ooh, that's not good looking. So there is good and bad. The bad is that there is some MochaFRAPPE milkshake going on in here. Definitely coolant or water and oil mixture. That's not good. The good, though, is that there's no debris in the pickup tube, which means it probably didn't run super long this way, because if we did, or if this engine did run like that, since water is not the best lubricant, we'd see a whole bunch of forbidden glitter, which we don't see any. And the oil pan looks pretty frappy. Next, we can remove the oil pump. Have to use an 8mm to remove this. Let's see here. Will this just lift out? Look at that. Super simple.
It's high time that we take this oil pump apart.
Look at that. That was really simple. That does the what? Wait, how does that come out of that? I guess that doesn't come out of that. The snout of that does not fit through that housing. So maybe the gear is pressed on. That's odd. Let's get this cleaned up so we can take a look. So this is in really good shape. There's no signs that any kind of debris went through here. I didn't really expect to find any signs of an oil-related failure. And there's definitely no signs inside the oil pump. Gears look great. Housings look great. Sad thing is, used oil pumps, there's not a lot of demand. And I believe this is an oil level sensor. There's a little float. So we're going to get this removed so we can remove this balance cartridge. We actually may need to pull the whole thing out. Next, we're going to remove this balance cassette. Now, I don't plan on taking this apart or removing it because I didn't get all the bolts out. I think that'll do it. Okay, blue. That did it. This has a gear that meshes. Here, I'll show you in a second. So this has a gear that meshes with the gear on the crankshaft. And it's got some little bitty camshafts that have weighted ends that basically make the engine feel way smoother than if it wasn't there. Now it's time for the upper oil pan. Now I think we can pry this upper pan off. There's little bitty places to pry, but I don't think, oh, maybe blue does fit. And the upper pan is off. Now this block there's a lot of engine juice in here. We're gonna just turn this over real quick and drain it to avoid a future mess. Oil shouldn't be red, but Toyota coolant is. Let's turn this bottom end over and see what it feels like. Smooth as caramel. I don't see any discolored rod ends, which would tell me that The bearings are likely in pretty good shape, but we're going to find out because that's what's next. I'm going to remove the rod caps 1 and 4, drive the rods and pistons out, and then 2 and 3. Did not take a ton of force to get those out, or at least that one. Now, I've read a lot of comments where people talk about the bluing of crankshafts, meaning it got hot. And yes, that does mean it got hot, but there's a hot from its manufacturing, and then there's a hot from its failure, and this is a hot from its manufacturing. And another thing I do like about this engine as I'm pulling it apart, it does not have fractured rod caps, it has machined surfaces, which you don't see that often these days. On to 2 and 3. Now we unbolt the main caps. That is not what I wanted to happen. Now we can lift the crank right out. Well, let's start with the rod bearings. They're beautiful, like perfect. I would reinstall these, and I'm not making a joke. They are that good, as are the main bearings. And these are coated, and I see virtually no wear whatsoever. All of the rods look to be in pretty good shape. Let's look at these pistons, though. A little bit of wear on the coating on the skirt. The rings look pretty free. It looks like that could have been cleaned a little bit too. That's cylinder 1. There's cylinder 2. Definitely cleaned. This one had a little bit of vertical wear, and you can see there's something caught right there. And the ring lands don't look so great. And the oil ring doesn't look so great. I wouldn't say that it was awful. You know, it's not like I could tell that it had lower compression when I pushed the rods and pistons out in that cylinder versus the rest. I bet these would clean up just fine. New set of rings. No idea if there are any value here though. Some rods and pistons out of engines, they sell for a ton of money, and some of them you can buy brand new at the dealership for so cheap nobody buys them used. As you'd expect, because there's no bearing wear, there's no damage to the crankshaft. This looks excellent. Again, not sure what the market is on them. This is still a pretty late model engine. Someone might need it. The bores definitely need some work. Lots of stains. I bet this thing sat with some coolant in there for quite some time. Some vertical wear on the thrust side. And there's the damage that we saw. I have no idea what caused that. Could have been something that ran through the engine at a different date. If you guys have any idea, you guys can put it down in the comments. It's definitely a serviceable block, but nothing that I think you could just slam back together. This wasn't some massive catastrophe with a hole in the front of the block, smashed spark plug, bent valves. This was just kind of a bad engine, but it's still a bad engine. It still necessitated being replaced. And on a 6-year-old Toyota Camry with 116,000 miles on it that seemed to have at least all right maintenance, not a ton of varnish, and the plugs didn't look that old, it's not good. It's not what I want to see. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen to every single one of these engines. This is the very first one that I've seen. And of course, with every known problem or unknown problem, there's always a first. So maybe this is the first one I've seen, but I'm sure some of you that work on these things for a living have seen this before, maybe, And if you have, put it down in the comments. I want to know, is this a common problem, or is this something to look after, or is this something that just happened to this one? Although I hate to even mention this, and I hate more to think about this, Toyota engines with a certain component on them have a history of this type of failure. The 10 to 13 Prius with a EGR cooler, not my favorite component, has problems with head gaskets, EGR cooler leaks, they get blocked. They have problems. We've torn those down on the channel before. They've ended much worse than this one did because I think they caught it earlier. Regardless, I hope this is not a trend with the Dynamic Force engines. I am not a fan of EGR coolers. I'm not a fan of EGR systems. Not all manufacturers have engines with EGR. And some of them do, some of them don't. So if you see an EGR cooler on your engine, I wouldn't panic. I wouldn't try to get out of your car or buy something different. That's not what I'm trying to do here. Just pay attention to the smell of your exhaust. Monitor your coolant level if you have one of these. And I don't even think if you have one of these, you need to be that concerned about it because the cars are pretty good at letting you know that there's a problem. And I think that's what happened here. I think this was caught relatively early. It didn't run for a very long time ingesting coolant. And that's why we didn't see any major damage. But still not great to see on a Toyota with such low miles. I mean, that Land Cruiser has 3 times the miles that this engine did. And it's still in the original engine, and it still runs great. And it's here because it's crashed, not because the engine's bad. So I hope you enjoyed this teardown. It's got a lot of really good parts to sell, a lot of late model stuff. Hopefully it'll make its way onto our website and eBay very soon. Speaking of our website, you can go to Importapart.com and peruse our inventory. I've been uploading our parts cards every single week. There's new stuff, new arrivals, like a Miata. It's the first one I've had in at least 6 days. At least, maybe 7 days. No, 6 days. Yes, 6 days. But if you see what you like on the website, you can add it to your cart. If you use the code IDOCARS, you can save 10% off of anything that you can put in your cart. I really hope you enjoyed this video. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.